It's time for the Wally Methot Show. Now, here are your hosts, Brent Wallace and Marc Methot.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Wally Methot Show. I'm Brent Wallace. He is 13-year NHL veteran defenseman Marc Methot, who's apparently gone shopping and has a new T-shirt.
Yeah, I've got a lot of new stuff, Wally. I rarely, it's Biggie. It's notorious. No, I bought a bunch of stuff and I got a new table here. It's a foldable table that I got at Walmart. Things are good. Things are really looking up here, Wally.
Wow. We are paying you way too much.
I needed something different because we had I was using this huge like round dinner table downstairs here in the theater room and it just made no sense. So went out to Walmart, bought a nice cheap table. It's foldable. My knees fit underneath. We're ready to rock.
The theater room. Oh my, the estate.
Yeah.
As always, the Wally Methot Show brought to you by Ridge Rock Brewery. Go to ridgerockbrewco.ca. Use the WHAM Show coupon code. Get 15% off your order. Don't forget, get home delivery. Get them to drop it off right to your doorstep. Try Amber Ale, Blonde, American Pale Ale, delicious stouts. They also have this Norwegian beer, Spro. It's very good. So go to ridgerockbrewco.ca, use the coupon code, and enjoy some nice pints as we get set to welcome in the NHL season. Meth, hockey is finally starting to get back here, right? Like we have the rookie camp now getting underway. It's going on in Buffalo. We'll get to that in a sec. But apparently Pierre Dorion not done making moves as it came out on Wednesday that Tyler Mott, the former New York Ranger and longtime Vancouver Canuck, signed with the Ottawa Senators. So 1-year deal, $1.35 million. He's listed as a center, but has played a lot of wing and suspect that that guy, Alex Formenton, isn't exactly signed yet. So that's a depth move and a spot he can fill.
Yeah. And he's not Alex Formenton. Let's get one thing clear here. He's not going to bring that same speed per se, but he's a versatile player. He's a good checker. You know, a lot of these role players from around the league, you don't really know a whole lot about him, right? Like you kind of follow casually throughout the year, but he's got some playoff experience, had a pretty decent run last season there with New York. So had a couple goals, but from my understanding, good checker, very responsible, brings a lot of energy. And, you know, he's still got mileage. That's another thing that I like about this pickup that Pierre made, and low risk, by the way, 1.35 on a 1-year deal. I mean, at 27 years of age, I'm a big fan of this pickup, and it sounds like a lot of the other fan bases that had him are pretty positive and high on him. So yeah, it's a great depth move from Pierre Dorion in the Sens.
A couple of notes. One, he's never scored more than 9 goals in a season. That's not a shot. It's just a stat. He's played 269 games, 35 goals, 62 points. I will say last year he averaged 14 minutes a night between Vancouver and the Rangers. Like 14 minutes, that's third line minutes.
Significant.
Like that's a dependable player. The New York Rangers weren't slobs by any stretch of the imagination. I know he only played 9 games there. But again, dependable forward. I don't mind the move. Oh, and one more. He is a Michigan guy, so maybe that's why they brought him in, because now they're building the Michigan Senators, it appears.
Yeah. And like we talked about, we don't know the state or the status rather of Formenton as it stands right now, what's going to go on here as far as the signing goes and everything else. So I think for us right now, I mean, I thought, and Wally, I'm not just saying this, I legitimately thought there was an opportunity. When I mentioned Derek Brassard a couple weeks ago, that was legit. And it's my understanding that there was a little interest. But at the end of the day, I know Derek's probably looking for something very concrete and he doesn't want to go on as a PTO. A little more risk bringing in a player of that age. So this is sort of that next best thing, right? Maybe not, doesn't bring the skill set and experience that a guy like Brassard would bring, but he's got a lot of energy and he'll fit right in with DJ's style of play.
All right, so a couple of things. One, Craig, cue the board. We call this Who's the Lefty, and that is to fill the Alex Formenton spot. And this was, we just did it before they signed Tyler Mott, and I was thinking perhaps there's some depth guy in the organization if Alex Formenton, who's an RFA, doesn't sign by the beginning of camp. And we've seen this play out many times, right, Matt, that the RFAs tend to get into the season maybe once or twice, 1 or 2 games, and then suddenly it gets signed. But we saw that with Brady Tkachuk. There's always that pressure point of missing games that starts to bring RFAs into signing contracts. Would that be fair?
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure. And as a player, and we've talked about this before, we talked about it ad nauseum regarding Brady during that little debacle. It wasn't a debacle, but you know what I mean. And I think it puts a lot of pressure on the player when camp starts to approach, right? Because then all of a sudden there's media members hunting you down, trying to get some juicy quotes out of you. One small comment that you could make, they can take out of context, print it out there, and it turns into a bit of a back and forth battle, right? So, and obviously the team too. I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of pressure on the team as well here. I mean, Pierre's done a fantastic job this summer, but we talk about how important the start is for this hockey club. Pressure's on. This isn't a scenario where they have so much depth at this point that they can just get away with perhaps missing a player of that caliber. I mean, we're talking about a first line penalty killer that is not on your team right now to start the season potentially. So that's significant. And then of course the speed that he brings every night, and that line potentially between him and on the other side with Matthew Joseph. I mean, that is deadly. So this is a great filler. And I don't like calling players fillers, but a player like Tyler Mott is certainly a depth piece that they can bring in, kind of like almost like a Gambrell type of situation where not bringing a ton of offense, but pretty responsible, decent on draws, can play up and down the lineup if he needs to. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But not having Formanton in your lineup to start will be a bigger loss than I think most people truly appreciate at the moment.
And just like he's and Tyler Mott's 27. I don't really know a lot about him, but the point I want to make, and you've made it, is he's not Alex Formanton. He's not coming in as the savior. And if anything, we don't know how many games he may end up playing for the Ottawa Senators, right? Like, you don't know or does he move Dylan Gambrell out of that spot on the fourth line center, and Dylan is now a depth guy. Like, there is some movement, but I will go back to the left side just because it's a good debate, and that is, these are some of the players that we think depth-wise in the organization could fill in the Alex Formanton spot, if not for Tyler Mott. Igor Sokolov comes into camp. Roby Arvente, although I believe the name is actually different. Do you remember Gord Miller at the World Juniors was saying Yaravent? I don't know.
I know. I never get it right either.
Yeah. So I'll embarrass myself for a while on that. Ridley Gregg, who is, we do know he's still not playing and participating in the rookie tournament, but like he's going to be at main camp. Pierre,
he separated his shoulder. Like, I'm not surprised that he's not playing in this tournament. I was shocked that he was even in the conversation initially. Like, when I heard that potentially he was going to be suiting up, I'm like, what? Like, talk about a turnaround. So, I mean, I don't even think he'll be 100% come NHL training camp, but and think of the time, Wally, that he'll have missed leading up now. So he'll be playing the catch-up game as well. So that's a bit of a loss there, but we obviously wish him well. I was genuinely shocked initially that he was even in that conversation of playing the prospect tournament.
Yeah. And I get the sense that Pierre Dorian back on August 22nd at the golf tournament with the CP Women's Open, he kind of alluded to it. He said, quote, regarding Ridley Gregg, he won't need surgery. He's got a separated shoulder. He'll probably be out 3 to 4 weeks. We'll need to evaluate him as we get closer to rookie camp, but he'll play in exhibition games. And I think he means regular season or regular camp exhibition games. So we'll evaluate him as he gets closer to the rookie tournament, but he'll be part of training camp and he will play in exhibition games. So he's close, but that's August 22nd. I mean, everything can change, but we do think Ridley Gregg is closer to getting back in the lineup. And let's face it, we saw what he did at the World Juniors. I think he's ready for main camp.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Not health-wise, but that he's got that kind of skill. Victor Lodin, sorry. He's also another one. He's 23, and same with Igor Sokolov. They're the oldest of the guys. The other guy not on the list, I guess, is a PTO. Your Derek Brassard is not crazy. Like, there were options for them to do that. I think Tyler Mott is likely a better scenario than maybe older players, which we're seeing get pushed out of the league at an alarming rate this season, which I want to maybe sometime touch on in a bit, is like Igor Sokolov is an interesting one to me, right? He's 23. He had finished second in the AHL in scoring last year with the Belleville Sens, second in the team scoring, 50 points, 19 goals. He's coming into camp a lot lighter, a lot quicker. How much quicker, I don't know, but you need to keep up with this Ottawa Senator group.
He's leaned out. He's leaned out even more. That's the word.
The shape he's in, apparently best of his life. I know he's 23, but best of his life. He's ready to go. He's supposed to look really good.
That's some insider information there, Wally. That's exclusive insider training camp info. No, joking aside though, it's a good point though, right? Because I remember like just watching him last season, getting those little glimpses of him in exhibition games. Like he did not look out of place. Now there were times, maybe on the defensive side of the puck, you could tell like in the defensive zone where there were issues at times, very small, but like even his compete level in the offensive zone for loose pucks and getting his big rear end right in front of the net, not being able to move him around because he's a big man. Like I met him in person. He's my height and he's a big guy. He's obviously got a strong lower body. So that's another player though, like a legitimate player that's almost turned into a bit of an afterthought, in light of all the pickups that they made over the summer. You kind of forget him a little bit. He gets lost in the conversation.
Yeah.
That's another guy that is a competent potential third line winger to start the season, assuming Formenton can't do that and Ridley Gregg is obviously out or whatever. So these are all conversations that are exciting, and it's a good position to finally be in. If you're the Ottawa Senators, if you're the fan base, and now you've got options. I mean, this is fantastic. This isn't a conversation we were having 3 or 4 seasons ago. So, it's a good problem to have. And I've always put so much emphasis on this, Wally, training camp. Like there's a reason why you have it. It's an opportunity for these guys to show what they have, bump each other out of the way, and perhaps, leapfrog a couple players on the depth chart.
Okay, so there's a couple of things with Sokolov for me. One, he's an RFA. This is an important year for him.
Big time.
Right? Contract year. You're not playing in a regular shift in the National Hockey League. You've got to make something happen. This is on you,
totally
right?
Agree.
The other issue is we've talked about Ridley Gregg and all the other guys who are coming behind him. I know he's a late bloomer because remember he got passed over in the NHL draft twice. Wasn't really considered much in the junior league. So he's used to being the underdog guy that takes longer to develop. But if he doesn't develop this year, I'm concerned about him being an NHL regular, at least with the Ottawa Senators in the future.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and that's at that age, like you're going into your last season, you never want to put more pressure than you need to on a player, but I mean, that is
but they know about it. They know
it's a critical year though. Like you have to show me what you can do now. And if I'm Igor, I'm going into that camp with a chip on my shoulder. I want to see his compete level elevate to another level there. I want to see a little more of that edge. He brought it last year. I'm not saying he didn't. He did. I want to see more of that and then some. And I think if he could add a little bit of that offensive touch too, maybe pot a couple goals at Cam, make a little noise in the point columns, then he's making a legitimate case for himself, right? That's when he gets into that conversation where, okay, he's leaving us no choice. This kid's an NHL player. So it's a big year for some of these players. And when you feel the younger guys you mentioned there, Wally, with players like Ridley Gregg coming in now, vying for those positions, maybe ahead of time a little bit, it makes you that much more motivated as a veteran now in training camps to do something about it. So that third spot on that left side without Formenton right now is super intriguing. And you've got so many options that I don't even know where to begin. It's going to come down to camp, obviously, but Sokolov's a big one. Igor's got to make a splash. And then we obviously have Tyler Mott now in the equation where he could fill in. I don't know what happens with Gambrell and Kastelik. There's a lot of little storylines that are going to be fun to keep an eye on.
But the reality is, Beth, and you know this as a player, the spots are almost all but taken. Like if you're any of those guys we just mentioned coming into camp, you know that you are in a massive uphill battle to try and get a spot. Yeah. Are you not? Just based on dollars and cents.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. And I've always preached this. Like we talked about Brandstrom a little bit in the past and other like fringe established players. You have to knock the door down in camp. Like you have to make it to the point. Like you can't be vanilla. You can't be on par with some of the vets. You need to go above and beyond. You have to play better than a lot of the regulars because the regulars are coming in. They're going to be pretty Joe casual. They want to get their hands going, their legs going. They're not going to be going all out. So you being on par with those guys is never going to cut it. You need to come into camp. You need to make a splash. You need to make a statement. And that's where you grab, because there's going to be a ton of scouts, the GM, the assistant GM, all the coaches, they're all watching. They're all paying attention. Every shift matters. They're going to be paying attention to your compete level, how much better you are than perhaps some of your peers, etc. So that's an area where, and we mentioned some of the names here, it's inexcusable. You have to make a huge splash and impact in camp and make it an incredibly difficult decision for the general manager.
Did you do that? Like,
I
was
did.
there a year?
I did.
Right?
I went to camp. I went to camp with the chip on my shoulder. It was my last year. And I remember even saying to Aaron Portsline, I know I've told this story before, but I said, and I probably should not have said what I said, but
right.
but it motivated myself to back up my words. So I go into camp, and Aaron was trying to get a feel for where I was at.
Yeah.
He was the main beat writer for the team. And I told him, like, you know, if they don't want me, good riddance, I'll go somewhere else. That was basically the quote that I had as an unproven NHL player. And but it lit a fire under my own ass, where I played in these exhibition games and I played out of my mind, right? Because I was playing with fear and anger, and I was super motivated. So they respected it. And at the time, it was Scott Housen, the general manager. And I believed his response was, I don't mind a player being competitive and setting goals for himself or whatever. He covered nicely for me, but I could still remember going into the rink the next day. And like, I remember Freddie Modine was on the bike. He was a veteran at this time, and he was reading the Dispatch newspaper because, of course, we didn't have cell phones at the time to the degree we have now. And I remember looking up at me and just kind of shaking his head and going, oh boy, like he said something like that, you know? So that's the type of pressure you have to put on yourself if you want to make that jump. And I did that. Luckily for me, it worked out. I don't know what would have happened had I not played well, but you know, it is what it is.
Did Adam Foote, I think, who was the captain maybe at the time, or whoever was, maybe a Rick Nash, did he say anything, or did Scott Housen coming back to you or anything?
No one. It's funny. Literally nobody in the organization, at least from a management or front office point of view, said a word to me like about that. Like nobody addressed it because I was backing it up on the ice. And you know, like sometimes you gotta make a little noise and you want to get someone's attention. And I certainly did that. Now, I'm not advocating for players to do exactly that, but I was frustrated, right? I remember being on the balcony of the hotel room and having that phone call with Portsline and basically being forthright with them. So anyway, long story short, that's what it's all about at this level when it comes to this, because you're fighting for your livelihood and you need to show that on the ice.
Could you imagine if you were in the Twitter world when you said that?
Oh my goodness. I wouldn't have lasted.
You would have been gone.
I would have been gone. Yeah. Yeah. That was just before Twitter really kind of became a thing, right? At the time, I think Bissonnette was really the only player that had a Twitter account because it was taboo to have an account, right? Like you just didn't want to do that. You didn't want to draw more attention to yourself, but the landscape's changed quite dramatically.
Well, just like Marc Methot bet on himself, you can bet on the Ottawa Senators all season long. Sign up to sportsinteraction.com/Wally and Methot. They'll match your first deposit up to $500 in sport bet credits once you place qualifying sports bets, and those bets have been settled. Go to sportsinteraction.com/Wally and Methot. Fantastic partners along the way, and they have done a fabulous job with setting up some of the odds. We will get to some of those a bit later in the show with our good friend Craig. You talked about training camp. Do you remember rookie camp very well? Was there a sense of nerves? And I'm thinking of this camp with the Ottawa Senators. They're going to play 3 games, the rookies.
Yeah.
This is the first year, I want to say, that I can remember being this much attention spent on this rookie camp. It used to never, people were like, oh yeah, the rookies are playing over there. But this is a big one. Like people want to see Jake Sanderson. They want to see the guys who are going to fight for spots, and they're going to get a chance to see how they look amongst the other rookies here in the National Hockey League, or at least with the Devils, the Canadians, and Sabres.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this year in particular, right, when we thought that Greg was going to be joining the group, I think there was that much more excitement. Obviously, it's still there. Everyone wants to see what Sanderson can do in company, but those were the 2 big boys that, at least from my vantage point prior to the news about Greg, that I was excited to watch. But when I played in these rookie tournaments, they were usually in Traverse City. I was with the Blue Jackets at the time, and we'd be in this tournament, you know, with like all the teams that were in the same division, you know, Detroit and I think Nashville was there, Chicago. I forget all the teams because it was always kind of flip-flopping. But at the time, Wally, it was a goon show. It was a goon fest. I mean, it was just fighting and showing how tough you were. And you know, if you were a stay-at-home defenseman like me, which I never really went looking for fights, I got in the odd fight by chance. Yeah, there's something perhaps happening on the ice, but never stage fights, right? But that was the thing then.
That was
so thankfully it has changed big time since my days back in the early 2000s playing in these tournaments. So Now it's more skill based. It's more realistic. You don't have the big dummies out there skating around, self-serving, fighting each other. I mean, it's beyond me why that was a thing back then, but that's the way the game was played and the culture involved. And did you ever cover any of those things, Wally?
Oh God, yeah. So, well, one, you just made me think, like, they used to dress every tough guy for every Montreal or Toronto game, right?
Yeah.
It's just a mess. So I always remember, like, oh, Zenon Konopka, Rob Ray or whatever, Chris Neal, Brian McGrattan, they're all in the lineup. It just seemed. I did one of the funniest rookie camp stories I remember. I don't know if it's funny or not, is actually in London. I don't know if did you go to there was a rookie tournament? No, it wouldn't be you in London. So the Sens are in London. Mikhail Wickstrand is on the team. And I can remember one of the staff members telling me that he doesn't want to get hit. And we're like, what? And so the next day he went to the airport alone and left and went back to Sweden. He left the team. And so, and he called, if I'm not mistaken, it might have been Randy Lee or Pierre Dorian, and said, yeah, I'm not doing this. And so he flies back, and that's the Brian Murray quote about he can go back and something about he can work at a grocery store all he wants, whatever, but he's not playing hockey. And they didn't allow him to play pro hockey for a few years. So I think it was a few years, something like that.
Well, I thought I crossed. I'm looking him up here. Yeah, Mikhail Wickstrand. I'm trying to remember when I would have perhaps crossed paths with him. I think he may have gone to one of the camps that I was there for, but I don't think he lasted very long either. But
like a day.
Yeah, that's the game. The game here is like those rookie camps can get pretty heated, right? Because you got a bunch of young guns that are just running around trying to make a name for themselves. So, I'm excited to see how Sanderson does in it this year. I don't really. It's hard to. The problem with these tournaments, though, Wally, is that the on ice play can be very chaotic. There's not always a ton of structure to it. You're playing with a lot of players that you're relatively unfamiliar with, so it's not
penalties.
There's a lot of penalties. It's not the smoothest looking hockey out there, right? Like it's a little choppy.
Ugly hockey.
But the good players. Yeah, the good players are always going to stand out a little bit more, and that's fine. But I think for me, it's more, maybe those fringe guys that you're unsure who to invite to main camp. That's maybe more the purpose for them. And then, of course, giving your younger guys like Sanderson some more reps before camp to get them better prepared. But I mean, I'm not going to look too much into it. I know if we can catch a couple games, that'd be great just to see how Sanderson looks. But I'm really more interested in main camp.
There is a build up to main camp, and brought to you by BEI, Bonnechere Excavating Inc. They continue to help build the Ottawa Valley. Fantastic work. If you're looking to get your driveway done, any landscaping needs you have, Bonnechere Excavating here to help. Competitive pricing on all your landscape needs. Give them a call, 613-432-1120, or go to BonnechereExcavating.com. BEI, helping to shape the Ottawa Valley. Please reminder to slow down in construction zones on the highway. The NHL Ottawa Senators preseason schedule, Meth, I think it's a mess. And the reason I say that is
why
they play 8 games. So the first 2 games are in Toronto, which I've never seen this before. They're playing a split squad game on the same day in Toronto, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. I don't know if you've ever gone through this. I've never seen a split. I've seen split squads. You play Winnipeg, one team in Winnipeg, one team in Ottawa, or split squads. I've never seen this.
Well,
that's how they're starting.
I know it's a weird schedule. Now, typically when teams go play out east, or they'll go to Winnipeg or some of these other cities that are a little further, there's usually a little bit of money involved, right? There's a little more incentive for the team to do so. So that's something that I think people need to be made aware of. But it's funny when I look back now, I can still remember all the guys that I played with. Most players, at least, not all, don't like playing exhibition games, right? Like you do want to play in a couple of them to get your legs, of course, but you hate playing road games because they're all day trips. You feel like absolute dog shit when you get there to play because you've been up all day with a pregame skate in the morning, flying all afternoon, and then expected to play an elite level sport in the evening without looking like an idiot. Now, if you don't take those games seriously, then it's not that big of a deal. But I hated playing in them. I like to play at home, maybe 2 or 3 games max. Like the coach would always ask a veteran, Meth, how many games do you want to play this year? Like, what are you thinking? I'm like 3. And I'm kind of looking at him with that reluctant sort of vibe that I'm sending off. And usually they kind of smile and laugh. But in any case, I think it comes down to the last couple games. The first few are usually just a shit show because you've got a huge amount of numbers. A lot of players that probably shouldn't be playing NHL games are still involved at the beginning of camp, but then it starts to thin out. And those games 6, 7, and 8, you get the nice little dog fights to watch between players vying for the same spot. So, I mean, it is what it is. It's a weird schedule, no home games, which is kind of bizarre, but what do you do?
So I'm thinking if you're the veteran, you're looking at the schedule going,
you're cringing.
One home game, one
I know.
home game.
I know.
So
I know.
So you're playing a game in Belleville, a game in Winnipeg, a game in Montreal, and then you go on the road and you play the 2 Kraft Hockeyville games, one in Newfoundland and one in New Brunswick.
Yeah.
You're wrapping up your training camp on the road. So I know guys used to go away. Teams used to do it all the time. They probably still do the bonding stuff, but normally it's after the team's picked. This is a little like you're going to take a lot of guys with you. Obviously, if you're playing on the road, I don't like it. I don't like it for them to start the season this way at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're not in charge of that, so there's not much we can do about it. But no, it's slightly annoying. But this team is in no position. I'm talking about the players. They're in no position to complain, right? Like at this point, you have not earned the right to nitpick what games you want to play and what your schedule looks like in training camp. Because when you're finishing at the bottom of the barrel, you're pretty much, at your team's mercy at this point. You're going to have to do what you're told. You're going to have to shut up, have a better start of the season, and then maybe you can kind of negotiate with the general manager of the team next off season. So I don't feel sorry for them. This is a wake-up call for the group. And, hopefully they can have a bit of they can find that chemistry, if you will, going into camp here toward the end, get a lot of reps in together. Don't complain. Just put your head down and work hard, get off to a good start. And then you can start worrying about perhaps next year's training camp.
I will say, like, that trip out east will be fun because Newfoundland is a lot of fun, and New Brunswick, small town. So you'll do some fun stuff, probably whether it's lobster fishing or out on boats. There's lots of that stuff involved, which always brings the team together. I just don't like it in terms of prepping for the season. But that leads me into, I guess, this point is I can't recall a year there have been this many guys skating this much before training camp begins. Now, training camp's a lot shorter than it used to be, mind you, and even when you were playing. But like almost everybody is in town and trying to skate. There's a few that aren't, but like, does this seem different to you? It feels different. They know the importance. They've talked about the start. I just get a sense that everybody wants to be involved right now.
Yeah. Well, it just goes to show you the culture that they've managed to sort of create here in this team, right? Team culture sounds like a bit of a buzzword at times when you hear players and coaches talk about it. And I think in a case like this, it's huge. And that starts from, your head coach, or rather your general manager, all the way down. But Brady's done a really good job with that too. He's created a nice, fun atmosphere in the room that's still very competitive because he leads by example, and everyone's following along now. And I think with all the pickups they've made in the summer that this team has had, there's a buzz, and the players feel it. That is never lost on players, right? Like when you're able to make some big pickups, some big acquisitions in the summer, you're sending a message to the team that you're doing everything in your power to allow them to win. You're trying to help the team win. And the players they're aware of that. They can feel it. So I think usually speaking, when you're seeing a bunch of players getting into town early, the way that we've seen here in Ottawa this summer, in Canada, it's always a good sign. The buy-in is there now. Players are pumped to start up. They can't wait to get going and get things moving. So I think that's just a reflection of how the organization has handled this offseason and the pickups that they made, as I just mentioned, and the overall attitude in the locker room.
You know what's different to me, or at least it seems to me, is that it feels, and this might get taken the wrong way, it feels more minor hockey league-ish. And the reason I say that is it's not about contracts for these guys. It's about purely winning. They realize that they have a much better team. They all want to be together. They want to hang out, and they just want to win. You don't sense, and I understand it's a multi-million-dollar business. Don't get me wrong, but I don't sense It's just everybody shows up and gets to work and does the work and go. Like there is a general excitement level of these guys being around one another.
Well, when you're on a short-term deal, if you're a young player, you're coming into the league, you're on short-term or you're on a 1-year deal, you're trying to prove yourself, you're always so consumed by, and it's not a selfish thing to do. It's human nature. You want job security. You want to know that you're set up. You want to know that the team has made a commitment to you. And until you get that, it's hard to really completely buy in on the winning side other than just maybe putting your personal goals aside. Right. So that's always a hard thing. But now you've invested in all these players and all the long-term contracts that you have with a lot of your core guys. All they want to do is win now. They know they're going to get paid. They've got their job security. Now they just want to win. And that's how you create a great culture in the room. When all your leaders have been fed, when now they're eating, they've got their long-term deals, they got their security. Now all of a sudden the focus just kind of changes just a little bit. It's very subtle. And I don't want people to take that the wrong way. I know it's a big business. I know everybody, even the 1-year guys, are making tons of money. Everybody understands that. But there's something to be said when all your core guys are signed to term now. You're holding on to them, and they know that. They know that they're going to be growing together. So their focus shifts just enough that now the focus is just on winning. And I love that. I mean, that's a sign that the team's buying in here. You saw the attitude towards the Tim Stützle signing and the players all commenting on each other's Instagram posts, and they're all pumped for each other. That's huge. I love where this team is heading attitude wise. Now that just needs to be put on the ice, right? Show me what you can do on the ice, take that next step forward, and the fan base will be all in behind them.
And so I completely agree with you. And you talk about Tim Stützle. I believe our last show was posted just before he signed.
Yeah.
So he, as everybody knows, he signed an 8-year, $8.35 million contract, the largest at $66.8 million, the largest in Senators franchise history. Were you shocked at the number? And if we go off Josh Norris number at 7.95, he's, whatever, 400 grand more. Is that fair? Can they continue to pay all these players? And I'll get back to, because there's something else I want to discuss with you. And that is, we're now paying all the guys coming out of entry-level deals as opposed to we used to pay all the veterans the money. It's now going to all the young guys. We're going to get to that in a sec. But your thoughts on Tim Stützle signing?
I love it. I mean, okay, there's always going to be a risk, right? When you're signing a player coming out of his entry-level deal to an 8-year deal and one of the largest or the largest contract in Sens history, obviously there's going to be a little bit of a risk involved. But I commend Pierre for this signing. I mean, from my vantage point, at least, and again, this is just my opinion, and this, I'm going to go off the board. I'm not going to talk about analytics. I'm not going to talk about the numbers or anything like that. Just from watching his play. And Wally, you and I had a bit of a conversation about this the other day where I talked about that sophomore jinx that you see kind of creep into a lot of players in their second years. I never saw that with Stützle. I mean, of course, there were growing pains at times, like any player. That's not uncommon. But his compete level, his competitiveness, that edge that you see out of his play never wavered. So the fact that you've got an elite skater who is very strong on his feet, unbelievable puck sense, especially once we saw him move to the middle. I mean, his game just opened right up. You just basically fed into his bread and butter, which is allowing him to hit that open ice with speed. I mean, for me, I loved what I saw out of that second season from him, and that it gave me a little more confidence knowing that, okay, I think he's the real deal here. This wasn't a one-off. You know that he's got his skill set, but to me, it's his mindset as far as the way he approaches the game, his compete level, the way he barks back at guys out there, Wally, gives them the extra shot. Like, you can tell he genuinely gets pissed off and wants to win. That's huge. That's how you build a proper culture in a locker room. And now you're talking about a second line center. We don't even know what his ceiling is yet, right? Like, we don't know what that true potential is just yet. We know what he's capable of to a degree. We've seen shades of it, but I mean, the sky's the limit with this kid. I'm a huge fan of the signing. I like to be fair and balanced. I like to be critical at times. It's very hard for me to do so in this case.
And you talked about when he moved to center as a winger, we all felt there was a disconnect, right? It just didn't seem right.
It was restricted. He was restricted.
Part of that, right. But part of that was he was just learning the NHL game as well, I think.
True.
And they were hesitant to move him until he could I guess, figure out perhaps the NHL game and the way it moves. So in his first 36 games, 7 goals, 20 points as a winger. Then Josh Norris gets hurt. So he ends up moving to the middle, 43 games. So the final 43, 15 goals, 38 points. The Sens were a 500 hockey team at that point. I don't think that's any. I think the two are related, that they're a 500 hockey team and Tim Stützle's in the middle. Does he need to work on his faceoffs? Okay, sure. But you get a sense that he is right where he belongs and that he is going to be arguably the best player on the team. Here's the question I have for you. If you had to take one center right now to build your team around, is it Josh Norris or is it Tim Stützle?
No, that's I don't
Josh
like
Norris
that
scored 35 goals.
I know. I don't like it because to me, I don't like the comparison because they're two completely different players in many ways, right? Whereas Norris is your trigger man. Timmy's your dynamic star player, billboard guy that, has the odd highlight reel goal and plays with a ton of compete. As it stands right now, I'd probably go with Stützle. I don't like it. Well, I can't answer the question. I can't. I'd probably go with Stützle, only that I think we haven't seen a ceiling yet. Norris, you kind of have a good idea where he stands. He's such a composed young man in that, he doesn't get too high or too low. He's very vanilla and even keel, probably kind of a boring guy off the ice. And I mean that in a good way, where he's probably going to bring a lot of consistency in his play over the next X amount of years. He's going to be very consistent. Whereas Tim Stützle could just break out of his shell at any point and be 100-point player. So, it's like, what do you value more than the other? I mean, the Sens are fortunate to have both. If I had to pick one right now, I'd probably go with Stützle, but it would come with a big risk. I know it's hard, man, right?
Josh Norris. Okay, but Josh Norris to me is a 35 goal scorer.
I know.
You can't find them everywhere.
I know.
And
I
because
pumped his
you
tires
called him
to no
Mr.
end last year.
Consistent, I'm taking him first.
And that's fair. And I love his two-way game. That's why I don't want to answer the question. Defensively, I think he's fantastic. He's so responsible. He's good on draws. We're lucky we have both.
Yeah. Like that's in 2 or 3 years, I would think that dynamic duo we could argue.
Well, never mind Pinto.
David and Draisaitl.
What about Pinto?
Right. So you think of the again, you get Pittsburgh, you got Malkin and Crosby, both won Hearts. Like it's tough maybe to compare that group, but in order to win in the National Hockey League, you need to be really strong down the middle of the ice. And with Shane Pinto, obviously, they are very deep.
And remember the team for was it 20 like around 2018, 2019, how thin they were and how quickly this turnaround has been. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Make a couple good moves, a couple good draft picks. All of a sudden, you potentially might have one of the deepest center cores in the NHL in a couple seasons, depending on how these guys develop. Right. So it's super exciting. It's the most important position up front is controlling the middle of the ice. And you finally have a 1-3 at least right now. I mean, it's so exciting. I'm pumped.
If they could only get the top 4D, we'll move on. You talked about salaries. So this is, I don't even know if I want to bring this up, but let's call it the Highway 401k.
Oh, shit.
So, okay, we're going to break down the top 5 salaries for Toronto and Ottawa. And you tell me who's got the better deal. So Tim Stützle, Thomas Chabot, Brady Tkachuk, Josh Norris, Drake Batherson come in at $37.48 million. Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, William Nylander, Morgan Riley. They come in at $48 million. So $10 million more, $10.5 million more. If you had to go into the Stanley Cup final, this probably isn't even a fair question. Which team would you take?
Well, right now, if we're just talking about let's forget about, because you mentioned Morgan Riley, there's a defenseman mixed in here or there, but let's just assume we're focusing on the top 6 forwards.
Each team has 1D. So 4 forwards, 1D.
Well, okay. I don't know. This might be a hot take. The Riley Chabot thing to me is they kind of write each other off. I think you can make arguments right there. Riley might be a step ahead a little bit at times, but Shabby's never really had a great partner. So I think they offset each other right there. So I'm just going to omit the defenseman. Right now, as it stands, if I were to go with a core into the NHL playoffs right now, I would have to go with Toronto because they've been the gold standard for a couple seasons. I got to give them that. Okay.
Yep.
But there's always a but. But if you look and you move forward, I mean, you look at Ottawa's young core right now. Toronto doesn't hold a candle to it. It just doesn't. Never mind the fact that Toronto is unproven. I mean, what have they done? They put up great numbers. They've got sexy points throughout the regular seasons. Some of them performed a little bit better this past year in the playoffs against Tampa, sure, but they didn't get the job done. Like, they've lost out back to since I was playing in Ottawa, even in the first round. Never mind, they lost the qualifying round in 20, lost in the first round the 3 prior seasons to that. I mean, they've been dog shit. So, when people get all heated on Twitter about, they dismiss the Ottawa Senators or whatever, the Toronto fanboys, it's like, what the hell have you guys done? You've done nothing. So, right now, the talent pipeline in Ottawa is ridiculous. Austin Matthews has 1 year left on his deal. This is make it or break it for this Toronto team. So if let's say, and now I can't read minds, I don't have a crystal ball, this is just a take, but if Toronto shits the bed again this season, Matthews could be gone. He'll just pack his bags and be like, why am I playing here? This team sucks. We're good during the regular season. Can't figure it out in the playoffs, and I know I'm going to get a lot of heat for that, but I could see him leaving. And this team without Austin Matthews, is this even in the conversation going into next year? I mean, right now, if I'm looking forward after this season, or perhaps even after the following, I'm taking Ottawa all day. Look at Toronto's defense. You've got Muzzin, Giordano. You've got some older players back there. Not a lot of foot speed. Riley, obviously still an elite player. I'm not dismissing that. Justin Hall, like hit or miss at times, but he's a good kind of reliable guy in the back end. And obviously TJ Brody. But I mean, right now, if Ottawa brings in a top 4 guy, this isn't even a discussion. I still stand firm on what I said years ago, Wally. Ottawa, maybe not this season, but for sure next year will be a nightmare to play against if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think Ottawa, I'll take them light years ahead of Toronto after this season. But right now, like, I think Ottawa, especially with their bottom 6 up front, there's more depth there, in my opinion. I just don't like the team. And players like Nylander, guys like Tavares, they didn't impress me a ton last season. So the foot speed thing with Tavares is starting to show a little bit. If I'm a Toronto fan, I'm starting to worry a little bit, quite frankly. And if you don't know what Matthews is doing, even more reason to panic. I'm taking Ottawa all day, specifically after this year.
You didn't even mention goaltending.
Do I need to? You've got Samsonov and Murray. We got rid of Murray. And I love the guy off the ice. But, I mean, Samsonov had a little success in Washington, so sure, I'll go with him. But if you're looking at these 4 goaltenders between Ottawa and Toronto, are you not going with Cam Talbot and Anton Forsberg as a 1-2 punch? I'm taking that all day.
Okay, I'm saving a question for when Craig comes out. I want you to tell me what the point difference will be. Like, how many more wins will Toronto have than Ottawa coming up here? There is a Battle of Ontario. It's renewed, though. The one good thing about the way that the rebuild is starting to happen, if you will, Ottawa, it looks like will be competitive, a lot more competitive than last year, is the Battle of Ontario matters now again. If fan bases are engaged, there's lots of chatter on social media, but they only play. So they play in Toronto on September the 15th, the second game of the season for Ottawa. They don't play again until in Toronto again, January 27th. And then the first game in Ottawa is March 18th. The schedule sucks for it because Ottawa fans don't get to see the Leafs and build that until March. But by then Toronto will be out of the playoffs and Ottawa will be no, I'm just kidding. But it is more exciting, right? It is more exciting when your rival is competitive, because for a long time, that Battle of Ontario was just a couple of games. It was just 2 teams playing and didn't mean a whole lot. Now there's some fire there. Look, I'm just curious of how much Ottawa wants to beat Matt Murray in goal.
You know what? I don't even know that it might be a bit of a storyline. but I'm looking at the bigger picture, Wally. I mean, with Matt Murray and Samsonov, like, we don't know how that's going to work out. And in fact, there's absolutely zero guarantee that Murray's your number one there right now. I mean, Samsonov
Sure.
can just take that job in a heartbeat. I think it's going to flip flop depending on who plays better in camp. Anyway, I don't think the Murray thing's much of a storyline. I think a bigger picture, Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, like if you can figure out a way to have a good night against those guys, like if you bring out a line, let's assume Formanton's back at some point, then you got Pinto and Joseph as a shutdown line potentially against that Matthews line. I mean, that's going to be a nightmare for Toronto. And you can hold those guys off the score sheet. They're so top heavy. You hold those guys off the score sheet, you're going to give yourself a legitimate opportunity to win every game you play against the Maple Leafs. And never mind their inconsistencies and potential unknowns with like in goal with their goaltending. There are a lot of areas that you could take advantage of right now if you're the Ottawa Senators playing against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I'm looking at some of those defensemen in Toronto, and I'm looking at that decor.
Okay. But I do feel that you have to give Toronto some credit. If they're playing against the Ottawa defense, they're trying to shut down that Matthews line with Ottawa's blue line. Not an easy task.
They can't do it right now. They're not going to do it right now. I'm telling you, they're not going to do it with Ottawa right now. And that's not me shitting on Pierre or anybody, because they've done so much.
I'm just trying to be realistic here.
Yeah. They've done so much to make this team great. And I want the optimism to remain where it is. This isn't me trying to be like a cynic or whatever. I just don't think so this is my issue. And this I think falls short on a lot of people's minds. They fail to see the long-term issue with that decor in Ottawa right now as it stands. And I'm sure they're still looking to tweak it. Look around the NHL's top lines, and we'll use Toronto right now as an example. It might be a little disingenuous because they're that good offensively, but who on defense for the Ottawa Senators is going to do the job against Marner, Matthews, and Bunting, right? Like, so you look at the decor, it ain't Shabbat and Hamonic. It's not. Right now on the Daily Faceoff website, I know we've all had our own potential lineups and how we kind of viewed it, but they've got Brandstrom with Artem Zub as their second pairing. Let's just use that as an example. You're sure as shit not using those two. Sanderson is a rookie. He can't do the job. So who's doing the job? You need a legitimate second pairing that can do those jobs. They can go out there on the ice when you're on the road or you're at home, and you can send them out there against top lines that are hot at the moment, right? So
can Nick Holden and Artem Zub do it, or could Nick Holden and Travis Hamonic do it? I'm getting a feeling that perhaps if they're in Toronto, one of Brandstrom or Sanderson sits, not likely Sanderson if they want to see him play, and they move guys around in order to be a shutdown.
This is what I think. I think Sanderson's going to surprise a lot of people with his defensive play. I think because he's not a small guy, he's relatively big. He's pretty strong. Yeah. And he's got some weight for him despite being a young player, but more importantly, he's got a great stick. He's got great hockey sense, and he's a great skater. So if he can figure it out pretty quickly, which is, it's a tall task, but it's a tall order, but he can do it. He'll surprise a lot of people. I think he'll be a guy that you can rely on to handle big minutes against top lines when he needs to. But I still think if you have a player like him and you want to play against a guy like Matthews and Marner and Bunting or whoever else, or even their second line with Nylander and Tavares and Kerfoot, you're going to need a guy that can stabilize, a cooler. So you mentioned Nick Holden and perhaps a Nick Holden and Artem Zub, sure. But then who's Shabby going to play with? Hamonic, I guess. Like, that's why it's like you should not have to make these changes specific to any given team around the league, right? Like, you should have an automatic shutdown pair for every night, no matter who you're playing against. They're your 1-2 punch against the other team's the opposition's top line. So again, and I know this is exhausting for fans to listen to, Wally, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing me talk about it. There's still a need for a top four guy back there. I still think they're looking for him. They're just not showing their cards right now, and they're not broadcasting it, to the world. But they're in trouble. That's the one weakness right now for Ottawa. It's the back end.
You do see, and this may be off topic, but you do see lots of teams. I suspect now everybody goes into camp for the most part with what they've got, minus signing PTOs and maybe small deals like Tyler Mott. I don't think you see any of those big moves because teams want to see what they've got.
Oh yeah,
as they get ready to start the season, right?
Totally.
So it's going to be I feel like it's Christmas before, maybe November before this
But
happens. Because now, yeah.
Well, no, but you mentioned Christmas. Like from my vantage point, Wally, it's like if this team, if that is the glaring hole right off the beginning of the season where you're watching games and they're losing every other night because of that reason specifically, because of the thin situation on D, then you're going to see desperation kick in, and then they're going to have to make some moves, and you might have to give up a legitimate prospect. But I get it. I get the patience thing, and I understand that you don't want to make any knee-jerk decisions too soon. But this team can't afford to come off, the start here in a shitty way again. They just can't afford to come off slow. They need a really hot start. And if your decor is your major glaring issue and it's that obvious, they're going to need to address it immediately.
Fair enough, but you need the other team to participate too. And
I agree. I know.
They want to see what they've got as well.
Yeah.
I've always known you, Mark, with a C, to be the voice of reason.
Really?
So, yeah. So there's a little issue going on in Montreal right now with the captaincy.
No, we're not. Okay, continue. Sorry.
It is making national news headlines that Nick Suzuki does not speak French. Parti Québécois leader Paul Plamondon says Suzuki must speak French.
Who?
Paul.
Just
Mr.
call him
Paul.
Pigeon.
So,
Pigeon Paul.
So listen, I covered Montreal.
Right. We're not allowed to be critical of elected officials. I apologize. But I'm still going to call him Pigeon Paul.
I start this conversation?
Okay, keep going. Let's talk about Pigeon Paul.
Because you're French, and I live.
But according to fans, according to the hardcore fans that were defending Pigeon Paul, according to them, I'm not a true Frenchman because I don't have an accent aigu on my E in my Twitter profile. So they were calling me tête carrée, which is a very derogatory term for French people to call English people. But they think it's a good chirp. But it's one of the worst chirps I've ever heard in my life. Sorry, continue.
So listen, people want Nick Suzuki to speak French. I understand the French topic. I covered when Saku Koivu was the captain. I covered the team, and even back then in 1998, he took over for Domfus, I think it was. I was there, and there was you have to speak French. You have to speak French. Well, so since then they've gone Saku Koivu, Brian Giunta, Max Pacioretty, Shea Weber. None of them have spoken French. I don't think the Montreal Canadiens are sitting in their office going, we didn't think of this. Everybody is aware of the issue with the French speaking players. We get it. But if that's who they think should be the captain, I don't know that it should be up to Jimmy or Robert to say, no, we want the only guy that can speak French to be the captain. It has to be a French. You want the best player. Whether you can speak French or not doesn't score you goals.
No, but it's not.
It's a touchy subject, though.
Oh, Pigeon Paul. It's not even about that. Listen, if anybody paid attention to any of the quotes, right, from players that we saw in the aftermath of the days that ensued, they were all singing Suzuki's praises. He's obviously the Gallagher, who's been there forever, was singing Suzuki's praises, saying that he's the pulse of the room. He's the clear-cut leader. He's the guy. That's all I needed to hear. I don't need to hear anything else. I get the language thing. Like, listen, I grew up French. I'm a French Canadian as well. I understand you want representation. You want your captain, who is a leader, the voice of your team, to be able to communicate to the fan base in French. I understand that. But in hockey, like any other sport, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't, just because you're French doesn't make you the leader in the team. The team, the players in the locker room don't give a rat's ass what anybody else outside thinks as far as who the leader is. The leader isn't going to be the guy that's scoring 30 goals or that speaks French or speaks English or whatever. It's those intangibles that they bring to the locker room that most other players don't do, right? They're able to they're great communicators. They lead by example. They bring integrity to the locker room. They do all the little things that most people don't see from the outside. I understand that what I just said is not groundbreaking news for most level-headed people. They understand that. But it's so unfortunate because you're adding this useless, nonsensical pressure and stress on a player that clearly doesn't deserve it. So now Suzuki is caught in the crossfire. He's probably going to have to answer some dumb questions about it, or at least try to avoid them, when it's such a high pressure position to be in to begin with. Playing for the Montreal Canadiens or the Toronto Maple Leafs, having to wear the C, it's a tough thing to do as a young player. I couldn't imagine the pressure. Now he's got some clown politician who's trying to score political points with his base by using an NHL player, an athlete who just plays a game for a living. You know what I mean? As an example. And it's like, what a clown comment to make. And all the fans over there that are getting behind that politician, shame on all of them as well. You're just so out of touch. Your last French captain was Vincent D'Afus in 1999. Nobody gives a shit. Like, was anybody crying when Shea Weber was the captain? Like, it's like, just get over yourselves.
Well, it's now 25 years without a French.
It's the only team in the league that does this. No other team gives a shit if it's a Swedish player, a Russian player in Washington, the capital of the United States. They've got Ovi. Like, his country's
Ottawa
at war.
had Alexei Yashin. Alexei Yashin
Ottawa had
was
Alexei
very
Yashin,
good,
another
very good speaker. He was the captain. I just wish they would stop making it the language issue and about you make it about the character issue. Does he,
like
so? And he is trying to learn French, so
good
he
for
is
him.
aware, right? Like, he's now accepted that responsibility.
But he shouldn't.
So let's not hammer him.
And he shouldn't have to. But he is doing it because that speaks to his character, and I appreciate that. Like, and I want to be clear. I've always been very defensive of Quebec, their culture, how they want to maintain their French language. Like, I get it, because it is different. You cross the border from Ontario to Quebec. I've got family over there in Gatineau, and they barely speak English. You know, like, I understand that there are some changes, and they're very proud. When you go to Quebec, you see Quebec flags everywhere. When you go to Ontario, we don't fly Ontario flags outside our front doors. It's different. It just is. And I understand that. But when you start imposing that on players in a sport, it's like, come on, man. Like, just get your head out of your ass, you know?
Yep. I'm with you. I've been in that room, and there's never the issue. Like, the reporters ask him in French, or sorry, they ask him in English. He responds. They translate if they need to. Everybody works around it. It's just, I just wish they'd stop politicizing it, but that's, I know. That's just the way it goes.
I was probably a little aggressive there, but I still stand by some of my comments.
No, it's a frustrating topic, because it's one of the reasons I believe, while players don't always necessarily choose Montreal, aside from the high tax rates, is because of the language issue.
Yeah. And Montreal, like, full disclosure, unbelievable place to play. Like, people ask me, Mark, what's your favorite arena? Now, not necessarily my favorite city to be in, but like, what's your favorite arena to play in? I always say Montreal, because their fans are so passionate. I love the rich history there. It's a great city. I'm not bashing that. I just don't like it when politicians go out of their way to bash a player over some nonsensical, dramatic bullshit. That's it.
I mean, the same. It happened with Saku Koivu. I can remember it clear as day, and I'm like, let's move on. All right, enough of us. Well, more or less. Let's bring in Craig, our good friend, as always. Craig, welcome to the show, as always.
Hey guys, what's happening? That was a good little show there today. Boys ripping off about the season. I like it. Good stuff.
Matt is fired up.
Yeah, it's good stuff, boys. There was a few last little things here, boys. I was over on the Sports Interaction website, sportsinteraction.com/Wally Methot, and they got a few Sens odds on there, kind of leading into the season, that I thought we might talk about a little bit. So something we actually touched on, I think it was on the Locked On Sens crossover episode, was we talked about goal scoring. I mean, you guys touched on it a little bit. A part is which center you'd like to build around or whatever. But something that I found was each guy's kind of goals per games played. And that was something that I hadn't looked at before and I even grabbed Giroux's from last year, and DeBrincat's obviously pretty easy to number crunch that one. But I was surprised to see that Norris actually leads in goals for games played. So, I mean, I knew he was up there with DeBrincat or whatever, but at what is it, 0.53 I think per game, and DeBrincat's 0.50, Kachuk 0.38, Batherson 0.37, and then Stützle and Giroux at 0.28. Is there a guy there in that list that you like? Who do you think's going to? I mean, I think there's two front runners, but other than that, is there a guy there you like there to lead the team in goals this year?
Wally, this is on you for a change.
So I like Drake Batherson. I don't know how that whole scenario is going to play out yet. So I don't know if there's distraction for him coming in and all that. I will go, and I touched on it earlier. I want to change my mind now. I Alex DeBrincat. I can't go against a guy who scored 41 goals twice. So I just think Alex DeBrincat is a special talent that is getting overlooked for whatever reason. Everybody wants to say it's Patrick Kane. He has proven he can score goals. I believe he will continue to score them. I think he may be Ottawa's next 50 goal scorer.
So, okay. So if we're talking purely goals here, right, Craig?
Yeah. Just goals.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you went goals.
I'm going to go with
Okay.
Norris. I'm going to go with my boy Norris still. I mean, I know how dangerous those guys are. Those half wall / face-off dot 1T guys on the power play. They're going to be automatic for him. He's looking at power play still on the first unit. I'm going to go with Norris. I know it's the easy one, but he's a pure scorer. I mean, like, he's 35 tucks, 20 assists. You know, you're going to get more goals from him. Pardon?
Yeah. I had changed my mind. I was going to say Norris, then I went to DeBrincat.
I mean, DeBrincat's a good choice too, because he's got Stützle and Giroux to play with. I mean, he's not playing with slouches, but I still think that first power play unit, I mean, you can't replicate that on even strength. I mean, Norris is going to have so much time to let that bomb go. I still think we're looking at a 40+ goal season for him.
I think Alex DeBrincat needs to be on the top power play unit. Why?
I mean, he's got to earn it.
He's got 41 goals.
Well, I don't know. I watched the highlight reels, and you did too. There were a lot of pretty nasty Patty Kane setups in that package. So I'm going to refrain from going with him until I can see what you can do with these new line mates.
Okay, but you don't just magically score 40 goals in the National Hockey League, regardless of who's giving you the puck. My kid gets the puck handed to him all the time, and he shoots it right at the goalie every time. All I'm saying is you have to have skill to bury it.
Yeah, I didn't know we're trashing your son here. That's kind of out of the blue, but I like it.
I hear you though. Like, my son can barely hit the net. He's 4. Like, so I get it. But the thing is, he has to show me first. Like, I can't just go with him because he had 40 playing with Patrick Kane on a bad team where he probably played an insane amount of power play, was catered to every night. This is going to be different. He's competing now with the top line playing ahead of him.
Something kind of interesting.
That in itself is debatable. Maybe by the end of the year, Claude Giroux, Tim Stützle, and Alex DeBrincat are the Ottawa Senators' #1 line.
Oh, Wally hot take.
Does that mean anything right now to be the #1 line? Because I think the top 6, right, is it going to matter? Like, they're both going to play. I think
it's fun.
What does it mean to be the number? What's the #1 versus the #2 mean? Like,
well, it depends, right? Like, if your top guys, whichever line you want to go with, is overwhelmingly playing more on a consistent basis, obviously they're your #1 guys. But I do understand your point, Craig. That's fair. I still think Brady's line is the pulse of this team. Come on.
Okay. Something I was going to say a second ago was interesting that DeBrincat actually has the 9th best odds to win the Rocket Richard Trophy this year at plus 2239.
Really?
Yeah, 9th best odds right now. He actually moved up, I think, 1 spot from when we last talked about it, which is kind of funny. Although people are not feeling as optimistic about the Sens making the playoffs this year. Those odds come in at a yes is a plus 19 and a no is a minus 250. So the odds makers aren't loving the Ottawa Senators' chance at making the playoffs this year. However, who gives a shit? What do you guys think?
They're playing in the East. I mean, and I'm a Sens fan, right? Like, I look at their competition this year, and I do think we're going to see a little bit of a shift. I've mentioned it before on the show, Wally, where I've mentioned, I think Florida might take a bit of a backseat a little bit more this season. And I'm talking about the Panthers. And you don't know what Washington's going to do. Boston's sort of a hit or miss, depending on, you've got their big guns are back. So you have to think the leadership alone will take that group into the playoffs, but you don't know, right? And so I think if Ottawa was in the West, we'd have this conversation, and I could convincingly go with the fact that they'd probably make it. I would comfortably acknowledge that they're a playoff team. Right now, I still think they're teetering. It'll be a dogfight right to the end, but I still think they're going to be just on the outside looking in, but that's still a successful season in my eyes.
I agree. And if they can't shut teams down, it's going to be a tougher year. No question.
Yeah.
They've obviously up front, they can compete with anybody. I believe they can compete with anybody, but it's that blue line. And right now there's questions in goal because we don't know what that's going to look like. I'm going to go with they are on the outside looking in.
Okay. Something interesting.
Hang on.
Wait a minute. Hold on.
Oh, don't pull this shit, Wally. What are you doing?
No,
all right. No, let's hear the news.
No, it's too easy to go, hey, they're going to miss. I think that team can come together enough. I'm going to go with the fact that they are bonding together on a tight-knit group basis. They're going to pull for each other to win. They will squeak into the playoffs.
Okay. Well, I hope you're right. Full disclosure here.
Okay. I like it. I mean, something that's going to play huge into that is how the Atlantic kind of settles out this year. Looking at the odds on Sports Interaction, who's going to win the Atlantic? Toronto favored, Florida, Tampa Bay. They're all pretty close. Like there's a consensus top 3 if you look at the odds makers. And then there's Boston, and Ottawa actually comes in 5th. Not great odds, but they come in 5th there. Do you think they land in that 5th spot? Do you think that they can move past Boston? Is there a possibility they crack the top 3 in this division this year? Any of those 3 things seem like possible?
Tampa, Toronto, Ottawa, possibly.
1, 2, 3.
Okay. Everybody wants to forget Detroit at the same time. I think Detroit and Ottawa are very similar in their win totals or point totals. So it may be with those groups. Look, I know Boston's
got
Bergeron and
Boston.
Krejci back.
They've got a new coach. They fire Cassidy. They bring in Montgomery. I've played for Montgomery. I don't like writing them off when they have that 3-headed snake leading that team. They're so competitive. What do you do? Like you could scramble these teams around after those top 3 maybe. And I don't know. I don't like, it's a tough question.
There has to be a changing of the guard at some point, Meth. There has to be with Boston can't play that great every year.
Well, and you mentioned Detroit. Like they brought in, who did they bring in? They brought in Perron. They brought in a defenseman, Sherratt. I think they brought in Sherratt.
Yeah.
And they've got Husso. And like my point is, I don't want to just name drop, but you make a really good point there, Wally. That's a team that just kind of gets lost in the conversation. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. Like a Sider back there still, like they've got some studs and they've really done a great job. I have them along on par with Ottawa as far as the way they've been bringing up some of these players, right? Like they've done such a great job at drafting. They're positioning themselves nicely.
I think Ottawa's ahead of Detroit here in just after the offseason they had. Do you know what I mean?
I agree.
Detroit really surrounded the players with good depth players, right? Whereas Ottawa went out and they got a legit like star in DeBrincat and a beat and Giroux. Like I think they added better players for this season.
Well, you said Giroux. Like when I was talking about Florida, for example, Craig. Yeah. Like they lose Giroux, Huberdeau, Uyghur, Marchment, Petrano. Like they've lost. So and that was to Wally's point as well. Like, I think we're going to see a bit of a changing of the guard. I just don't know how drastic it's going to be, right? Like that's why I'm reluctant to go, oh yeah, Ottawa's going to be right there in 6 or whatever. Like it depends how far these teams do regress despite some of those losses. I don't know.
Something that happens often, and I'll come to you right here with this one, is a lot of these teams, right? When you make a lot of changes and stuff like that, it can take some time for it to gel or work. You may find out it might not work at all. So when you guys talk about a changing of the guard here at the top, is that something that plays into it? Because I mean, Ottawa made a lot of changes too. Is that maybe something that could be a hiccup for these teams that changed as much as they did? Wally, you want to kick off with them?
And I was just going to make this point before, and it's the same now. Is okay. Let's say Toronto struggles out of the gate, or Florida, or what? Do they start moving out pieces? And then suddenly,
say that again. If Toronto starts
off
slow?
Florida, Boston, if they start out slow, do they go, it might be time now to start this thing over again and start moving out pieces?
You
just said earlier in the show.
Not with Toronto.
It's Matthews last year.
He actually has 2 years left, boys. I just looked that up 2 seconds ago. He's got this year and one more.
Okay. So when I mentioned Matthews, what I was probably really trying to emphasize is if he doesn't sign this year, they're going
to bring at him, right? You know what I mean? They move him.
That was what I was alluding. Anyway, sorry, Wally. Go ahead.
No, but if they are all of a sudden become horrendous, and we saw it, I think, even in Ottawa, they start shipping players out. Like in the 2013 one when they did the rebuild with Mike Fisher, Chris Kelly, all those guys, they just started moving everybody out.
Yarko got traded that year too, yeah.
So can that be a possibility if there's going to be some team that's going to struggle early on that we don't think is coming, and you're going to see some move somewhere, I think. So
I just
that's
don't
why
think
I'm not sold on all of a sudden it's Toronto, Tampa, Florida
Toronto
in 3.
Wally. Toronto's too deep up front to not get regular season success. I think, at least. You make a really good point. If that they struggle by chance, then they're going to have to make a move. But I think, with the consistency they're getting, like offensively speaking, it's hard to write them off. I still have them in the top 3 there.
But all I'm saying is you've seen it in the past with all of a sudden you're like, what's wrong with this hockey team? And then we find out later there's some internal issue going on, or they can't stand the coach, or whatever it is. All I'm saying is we've seen teams struggle who are supposed to be high end, miss the playoffs.
Yeah.
And then and then somebody slides in.
Yeah. No,
I think Boston, if you're looking for a team like that, it could be Boston, right? They've already started making some of those changes. It's like maybe more of those guys go out. I think the benefit all these teams have in the Atlantic is they get to play Montreal and Buffalo and all these terrible teams that are literally in the middle of trying to rebuild too, right? So they stink. So I think you're probably onto something there. So, but again, I was going when talking about Florida, like that's one. It's almost like they're just trying to laterally like restart their. Do you know what I mean? Like swapping out Huberdeau for Kachuk, right? Like
exactly.
Basically, you get like 6-7 years younger essentially in that one spot and don't lose a whole lot. But that's another team there where, I think they gutted out some pretty main guys. Yeah. That's a team I think could stutter. Do you know what I mean? Maybe the chemistry is not there to start the year, and they have a bad start like Ottawa does every year, right? And all of a sudden you can't battle back. So I think that there's an opportunity for Ottawa to crack into that top 3, but I think a lot of things need to go right. I think Ottawa needs to stay healthy too, right? Like these other teams, adding a guy like Tyler Mott helps, but if you look at a team like Tampa, and they just have depth that Ottawa doesn't have. Their defense has depth, and that's what good teams have. So, okay. Anyway, those are some of the odds. It's from Sports Interaction there, Brent. Did you have anything else you wanted to jump in on with today?
I do. I told Meth I was going to ask him one more question.
Oh, right.
Don't forget, one last time is to go to ridgerockbrewco.ca, 15% off your order using the Wham Show coupon code, get home delivery. That is our good friends at Ridge Rock Brewery. Speaking of which, Calvin DeHaan, who's a part owner, is now going to Carolina on a PTO. We wish him the best of luck. Is how many more wins, Marc Methot, does the Toronto Maple Leafs have than the Ottawa Senators this season? Don't look disgusted. Just answer the question.
Well, it's a total guess, right? Like,
well, so are all the predictions.
I know, but I'm a little more confident in those predictions because I can back them up with some like legitimate stats. Whereas this is just like throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks. I'd probably have them with about a dozen wins more. If that's assuming Ottawa's competitive. I don't know. It's a total guess. Like it could be 20, it could be 5. Like who knows? Well,
you keep telling me that they're a much better hockey team. I wanted you to.
They're making strides. Yeah. And they're making strides. And I think they'll be in the conversation for a playoff spot if they can get off to a good start. And I'm talking about Ottawa right now, but I still think Toronto right now is much deeper. Until Ottawa addresses their decor, it's going to be tough.
Toronto had
and when I say
21
deeper,
more wins last year too. Just adds up.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, so even the 10 number that I gave you guys like that, or 12, that's progress. Right. And I think, as I had mentioned earlier, Toronto's their top 6 are proven. They've got guys that have proven that they can do it in the regular season. Where I was being very critical of Toronto was their postseason. So whatever you do in the regular season means absolutely nothing if you can't replicate that success, obviously afterwards, especially if you're losing on the first round every year. So I'm always going to remain critical of them until they can prove me otherwise. But I still think you're looking at a better Toronto team overall going into the playoffs.
You guys talked about the Battle of Ontario earlier, and I want to kind of circle back on something here because you guys, it almost worked out where Ottawa played Toronto, I think in 2017, right? When Matthews was on the way up and Marner, like those guys were like, it was kind of their first playoff run or whatever, but didn't play. Obviously, you guys beat Boston and then a nice little run to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah.
Would Ottawa benefit from playing Toronto this season? Like they almost did reversed years ago and it didn't happen. Like could Ottawa beat this Toronto team in the playoffs this year? Or is it more so like, is this one of those measuring stick type things or whatever? Because I think Toronto's, arguably this is their window, right?
This is their window.
Yeah. So
if Ottawa if Ottawa solidified their decor, there's a legitimate conversation to be had here. And I know people will bring numbers forward, and understandably so. You know, you look at the point production on that top line for Toronto. I mean, it's even for their second line. I mean, you know, your second line guys are getting almost 80 points. I mean, at least with Tavares and Nylander. So I think if Ottawa figures out their decor, you can grind Toronto down the way Tampa did. We saw that. But at the end of the day, you still need that star power element. You need the big guys to be able to come forward and perform for you the way we saw with Tampa. You know, despite them being, you know, up against the ropes, they managed to pull it in and pull it together. I think Ottawa has that jam in them. The thing they're lacking is a ton of experience, and I think they're still very thin on the back end. That's literally my only critique. They've got goaltending now. They've got a good forward core. They've got some depth up front too. They're looking good. Just figure out the defense.
Matthew Joseph has 2 more Stanley Cups than Austin Matthews. That's all.
I know. Hey, I hear you. But
Matt Murray's got 2 too. So yeah.
As a depth player though, right? Like it's different. You know, when you're not, when you're the guy, when you're the guy and you're getting paid to be that guy, and all that pressure's on you, and you're playing do or die games in the playoffs, that is a different animal. That's why role players always tend to elevate their games, right? There's a little less pressure on them. Anything they get is bonus, and everyone's singing their praises, and it's good for the confidence. But
always
the pressure,
the third line guy.
Exactly.
Nick
but
Paul.
The pressure is always on
Nick
your
Paul.
top 2 lines to produce points, and it's hard.
That's all I was going to say was, I watched the third liner and Nick Paul bounced the Leafs last year, right? So it's that depth, I think, right? So
it's
the 07 Cup final, right? Ottawa dominates going into the Cup final, but can't get their top 3 guys to score goals because they're just being shadowed.
Well, and you're playing against a team that has done so much homework on you, and their top defensive players have a strict assignment on a nightly basis. And that's the challenge, right? That's why it's so important to have those depth guys. Like a guy like Connor Brown, like that would have been a great piece to hold on to. Obviously they couldn't, but those are the guys. Nick Paul, another guy, like those are the guys you need to win Stanley Cups. Quite frankly.
Why couldn't they keep Connor Brown? I don't understand. I still don't understand.
I don't know.
Why couldn't
I don't know. I'm not a business. I'm not the cap number cruncher guy to ask that question to.
I thought it was going to
be now. If you say, much like Matthew Tkachuk or what, like, I'm not signing here next year.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's right. He did say that.
Right.
He did say that. So to Pierre's defense,
fair enough.
or the Sens defense, he did make it abundantly clear that he was unsure. And that's about the last thing you want on your team, right?
Yeah.
Going into the following year. It's a big distraction.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I guess Chicago maybe felt that with DeBrincat too, right? Like if he wasn't
that,
planning on sticking around for that
what it
rebuild,
was.
right?
So, same thing.
So we're seeing a lot more of it now of guys not being traded so much in their last year, but they're second to last year. So that's there's a couple of trends that I want to maybe touch on in the next show, and that's all the older vets that getting moved around and on PTOs, and players who are getting moved into their second year of their contract ending. So anyway, that'll wrap it up for today's show, but lots of stuff coming up in the days ahead. So I hope you enjoyed is it called the playoff preseason extravaganza, Craig?
I think I just called it training camp preview. It was less extravaganza. We make too much of a deal about all these things, right? Just a little preview this week.
So you didn't overthink it. All right.
Extravaganza for when the season starts. How about that?
Fair. All right.
Okay.
We'll do it. See you next time, boys. That's the Wally Methot Show, brought to you by Ridge Rock Brewery.